Hey everyone, welcome back to Talkin Shop with ShopSabre. Today, we're going to dive into a topic that separates the profitable shops from the busy but broken ones. And it's honestly hidden costs. It's the stuff you don't think about. But first, I'm your host, Brandon Bombardo. I'm here with RoboLeg Nick Peters.
Hello, Brandon.
Why do I call you RoboLeg?
Can we cannonball instead of dive? I'm better at cannonballs than diving.
Sure.
Perfect.
Cannonball!
Cannonball into this topic today.
We're going to cannonball in today's topic with
Perfect.
RoboLeg Nick Peters. Nick, why are we calling you RoboLeg?
Question number one.
Why are we calling you RoboLeg?
It's a great question.
Share with the guests.
Old men shouldn't try to play softball with the young kids.
And what happened?
Well, I hit a ground ball to shortstop and thought I could maybe beat him to first with a throw.
Okay.
Took
Did you?
No, because I took one fast step, fought my knee pop and said, uh-oh, this isn't good. And then hopped down to first base, well, halfway, because I was out by the time I got to halfway.
You popped your knee.
Yeah, knee / calf / whatever else is down there.
He's not telling you the truth.
It's kind of a nightmare.
He severed his calf muscle.
I did somehow tear it. I don't even know how that really works, but
That's what happened.
it's not
Gross.
It's not fun.
But now he's in a boot. It's really cool.
It's a boot.
So we've been hobbling around the office.
That's been good fun.
He couldn't run to lunch anymore.
Nope. I need to get one of those knee carts to roll around on.
I made a really cool announcement to the rest of the team, though, after it. I was pretty proud of that one.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's fine. It's not a real nice way to treat your injured employees that are dealing with it.
I made an announcement to all the staff to let them know that you were injured. I thought it was very appropriate.
It was funny
Thank you.
for you.
It was funny.
Doesn't mean it was very funny, but coming from you, it was pretty good.
It was pretty good.
And then Alex, our esteemed marketing / video guy /
That was even better.
really nice shirt wearing guy, made a really funny picture.
Photoshop Nick's head on a person going up the stairs with some help.
I don't know why you even come to work here anymore.
It was awesome. That's actually an ad for the stair lift company.
Yeah.
And I photoshopped your face on it.
It'd have been even funnier for you to put a boot on the guy's leg.
Should have. I was
That would- I mean-
disappointed. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, we're going to get back to today's topic because I just wanted to
What was it again?
interrupt it. What?
What was it again?
Today's topic?
Yeah.
It's about what we basically just did. It's the profitability of shops
Oh, yeah.
and hidden costs. And our hidden cost is us delaying this thing. So, no, it's
We
going
get
to
more
be...
listens this way.
What's that?
Get more listens if we did like
More listens.
because now they're waiting and
Yeah, no,
listening
they've already
longer
left.
to get to the topic.
They've already left.
No.
No, so today we're going to talk about it because obviously you might think you know all about your margins, and a lot of companies do. They understand their margins. But if you're not tracking the right costs, you're leaving money on the table because those hidden costs are the ones that catch you after the fact. But let's fix that today. So let's chat about it. Nick, you're going to help us because you know everything about this.
What's saving the company money?
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, you're the guy. So, but I know you brought some questions and comments today with you, and
We do have a couple today.
we're going to jump in a couple. Only two today?
Just two.
Just two. Okay. Well, we're going to jump into those. You ask away, I'll answer, and then we'll jump into this week's topic.
All right. Question number one. Explain the benefits of ATC versus non-ATC.
So ATC, for those who don't know, is auto tool changer. So benefits of auto tool change versus non-auto tool change really comes down to cost savings. And again, this is hidden costs again, right? The time spent setting up your tools versus the time spent cutting. Because ultimately, when you have a tool changer, you can set up your tools in advance, which is, for one, going to reduce time during the job. But two, it's going to also reduce your potential tooling mistakes. Because if you grab the wrong tool and put it in there, human nature, make a mistake, you cut the wrong thing, now you have to start over. It also comes along with the efficiencies. You know, obviously when you're setting up a machine, you set up your tools one time for your tool changer, and from that point forward, those tools are remembered until you have to replace them. And so it allows you to be more efficient with setting up next jobs, and your cost of ownership long term typically is going to be a better ROI because you're spending less time each job setting up. So that's the big thing is, you know, auto tool change really is, it's an advantage to you if you do a variety of different materials, for one, because different bits for different materials, or two, if you have multiple tools required for one project. You know, cabinetry is a perfect example of that because you're drilling your shelving holes, doing your dados, and then cutting parts out. You know, you have three tools, one job. You're not having to babysit the machine. Let the machine run. You go do something else.
That's what I was going to say. All the time you can do other things while the machine's running instead of waiting for it to get
Right.
to the next tool change. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically hiring another employee is what
Yep.
it's like. And when you talk about the cost difference, you're talking six-ish thousand dollars different. I can't hire somebody for $6,000, so it's a cheap employee.
So you pay me a week?
Yeah,
Of
course it is.
Heck of a deal.
I'm a heck of a guy.
The amount of work I do, I should get paid like 10 a week.
Hey, there you go.
But that's fine. I'll settle for what I get.
Ridiculous.
Number 2, isn't bigger always better with your CNC machine?
And I think that can be used in many different. I'm assuming. Are we talking size here?
Yeah.
Okay. So, because obviously you could talk about horsepower too, and there's some ways to look at that. But if we're talking about size, no, I think right sizing your machine is always best, because when it comes to bigger, it's not always better. It doesn't apply in CNC the way it does to maybe pickup trucks, right? Bigger is better. But, when you factor in transit time for one, right? You're moving point A to point B on a table. It takes longer to get from one spot to the other if it's a bigger table. The other thing is loading and unloading. I'm a relatively short guy, we can call it. It's not easy for me to reach across a table and unload parts if it's an extremely large table. So having an oversized table does me no favors. So you think about your employees and what it takes them to unload the table. Think about cleanup. Obviously, it's more area to clean up. So again, just slower process. And then the thing that's often overlooked with CNC machines, larger vacuum tables are required, and larger vacuum pumps, are required for your vacuum table being larger. So the efficiency of your vacuum goes down with size. So, you can lose money quickly without even realizing it, because if you cut, as an example, 4x8 sheets all day long, having a 6x12 table is just a waste. You're wasting vacuum, having to run bigger vacuum pumps, more electrical costs, plus trying to reach a 4x8 sheet, part cut out in the middle of a 6x12 table is a lot harder. So it doesn't always save you time and money. A lot of times having the right size machine will save you more.
And on top of just all the things you explained, like taking up unnecessary space in your shop, right?
Right.
Especially a lot of guys are limited with the space, right?
This is true.
2 feet is kind of a big deal sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point there, Nick, is because when you look at shops in today's world, like, space is a premium. And so giving up unnecessary space isn't always convenient. So right. Find what you need, find out what you're doing. Don't let other people talk you into others. I've seen often where people are like, oh, I really think I need a 4x8 machine, but my buddy's telling me I should really buy the 6x12. Like, I get it. Your buddy's trying to, have you think about the cost difference there. And sometimes that makes sense to you, but your buddy's also not having to do the job all day long with it. So think about how it's going to affect you before you just go spend money. Because don't get me wrong, I would love for you to buy bigger and more expensive tables, but I'd be lying to you if I didn't honestly tell you that sometimes it's just not the right decision.
Right.
So any other? No, you said 2 today, right?
That's 2. That's it. That's what
all right. Well, that's our questions and comments today. Obviously, if you're listening to this and you have questions, or you want us to respond to any comments, shoot us an email. Obviously, you can send it to marketing@shopsabre.com. We're always happy to answer your questions, or of course, leave them in the comment section, and we'll do our best to try to get to any question and comment that we can. So, yeah, with that, we're going to jump back into today's topic. We're going to talk about hidden costs. Obviously, they aren't big, right? They aren't the big, obvious line items typically. That's why they're called hidden, because usually big, obvious things aren't hidden.
Right.
But they're a lot of times repetitive in nature, right? Your repetitive expenses, they're things that become so regular to you that they're often overlooked, right? And a lot of times they take time to kind of sink in, or they quietly sneak up on you. At the end of your year, you're adding up your taxes and doing your stuff, and you're like, wait a second, I spent that much money on this, right? Whatever that is, right? And it can ultimately kill your profits, because when you're otherwise fairly profitable, it's easy to lose profitability when you aren't tracking materials or, machine time, for example. Talking about the bigger machines, right? If it's taking your machine twice as long to get to the part because of how small the parts are on this large machine, things like, shop cleanup time, these things, you're missing half the picture if you're, omitting that from your profit and loss statement. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think common hidden costs to watch for, I would start with tooling, right? I think that's the easy thing in a CNC world is tooling costs. Where do you buy your bits from? How much are they costing you? How often are you breaking them? It's something that we actually did here at ShopSabre for a while. We started to track our tooling costs when manufacturing machines. And you'd find once we started tracking it by employee, you found, where you could sometimes save some money by simply training. You find a, employee that's breaking more bits than anybody else. So then you start to, follow up with, well, why are they? And you start to monitor it, and you start to, hey, they're doing something wrong, right? They're using the tool wrong, or they're whatever it is. And so sometimes when you think about cutters and bits and blades, are you throwing away bits because you think it's relatively low cost when you could be sharpening bits? And I find that to be one area where a shop sometimes can save some money is by simply just sharpening tooling and reusing tooling versus just throwing them in the garbage. So, obviously tools don't last forever either. So the flip side, I found shops that they're throwing away material for poor finish because they're not tracking their tooling, and therefore they're losing more money by simply not buying a new bit.
Right. Yep.
And so it can be both ways. So, are you tracking replacement tools? Are you tracking your jobs? Because how many tools does it take to do a job? Well, are you charging for it?
Right. And I don't know, not to jump off the subject that you're talking about, but like even things like power in your shop for electricity,
right?
Supplies to do the job. Like you think about what we have to do here with buying wood to build pallets and all the materials that go along with crating and the shipping of machines. I mean, all those little things that add up,
right?
That aren't necessarily part of the manufacturing process,
right?
But it's in the end, it's what you have to do to complete the job and get it out to your customers.
Well, I always remind people, like if you've ever had your car serviced at a car service facility, you'll typically see some sort of line item on the repair bill that usually says like shop supplies.
Yep.
Right. And some of you listening to this maybe do that. If you're not, maybe you should be doing it. You should start thinking about that, because if you use regs, if you have to use prep, material, whether it's, I don't even know, whatever you're using, isopropanol, right? Yep. Or, whatever, lacquer thinner. But whatever you're using, are you charging for that stuff? Because shop supplies is a real thing.
Right.
Like it's stuff that you're using and consuming that has to be taken into consideration. The other thing that you have to think about is, are you using old equipment? A lot of times that's an area where people lose the most money because they're not tracking their machine's downtime. And specifically when you're using outdated equipment or old equipment, lost hours for maintenance or, poor scheduling sometimes. The machine's just not fast, so you schedule inappropriately. Or not having a backup in place if, your drill goes down as an example, right? And you don't have a backup drill. So now you're having to wait to drill holes or do whatever you're doing. You have to think about things like that, because equipment can often be the biggest time saver and the most profit in your shop until something goes wrong.
Right. And then you have a machine that's not working. And then you have an employee that's trying to do the job the machine was doing, and then it's not as accurate.
And you charge for machine time.
Right.
Right.
Which is obviously way quicker than somebody doing it by hand.
Absolutely. Yeah. The other thing that I think people that have machines forget to charge for is your setup time and your programming, right? If somebody's giving you a file, if you're plugging and playing that file, yeah, there's probably not a whole lot of setup time. But I have always been a firm believer that there's 15 minutes every time. I don't care if the file's machine ready, you still have to do something, right? Yep. So you should always be charging some sort of a setup fee. It's that time prepping that file or changing a fixture out. Maybe you do stuff through fixtures and you got to change them out. That time's not free. Aligning your materials or, the labor for carrying the material onto the table and setting it up. It's got to be priced in somewhere. Otherwise, it's a hidden cost that you're maybe losing out on that I think people, again, often overlook. And, then they wonder why they weren't as profitable on that job.
Do you think it's something as easy as, oh, this is only going to take me 5 minutes, so it's not worth it. But then you take that 5 minutes and add it up per week, per month, per year.
Right.
It adds up to a lot of hours.
Well, just think about it. Like if you take 5 minutes, per job, and you do 10 jobs a day.
That's an hour a day.
It's an hour a day almost that you've given away.
Yeah.
What's your shop's labor rate? Right? If it's $100 an hour, that's $100 that you just gave away every day.
Per day.
For 5 days. So now it's $500 times 4 weeks. Assuming you're working
$25,000 a year.
You're right, exactly. Assuming that you're only working 5 days a week, like you're giving up $25,000 a year right there on 5 minutes.
I mean, that could pay for a pretty decent part of a nice CNC machine.
Right. And that's my point right there, is that you also have to think about things like material waste, your offcuts. Do you charge for the full sheet? Because unless you're using that sheet for something else, you're giving away profit again, because you paid for the sheet, but you only charge the customer for a portion of the sheet. Miscuts, it goes back to, you program something wrong or your customer programs something wrong, you run the file, it cuts wrong, you realize that you have to go back and fix it. Did you charge for the failure though? Did you charge for the wasted material?
No, because he didn't charge up front anyways. For that first time around. So now when you have to redo it,
Yeah.
you're losing again.
And the thing that I think also gets overlooked is bad strategies. If you're programming stuff and sometimes you do a nest and you realize after the fact, oh, I could have done this better. I should have done this differently. You know, you learn from that mistake, right? But it's lost time. And granted, you can't charge your customer for your mistake. So that's why it's so important to be efficient with your processes. And so, you know, when you look at manual labor costs, they're more than you think probably. I mean, your guys don't stop taking a paycheck, right? So when they're doing something manually, it's still costing you money.
Right.
And, you know, I think CNC machines specifically, you know, we look at what we do, ShopSabre here, like the accuracy helps reduce a lot of those costs, right? Because you might not have off cuts or miscuts or bad strategies because you're using nesting software and it's doing it a lot better. But for those who aren't using CNC machines, think about the risk they have there in miscuts and trying to utilize all the material because you're doing everything by hand.
It's almost impossible not to have those, right?
Oh my
If
God.
you're doing it manually, there's no way around it.
I mean, even with a machine, you're going to make a mistake here and there, right? Like you're going to tell the machine to do something. And the beauty about a machine is it's going to do what you tell it to, even if you're wrong. Right. So it happens. But the other thing that I got a buddy of mine who owns a print shop, really good buddy of mine, really smart businessman. But I always talk to him when he's in the car, right? He's driving.
Yep.
He's always calls me when he's driving. Usually he's got a long drive ahead of him, so he calls me and we're just chatting. But I think about the amount of miles he puts on his vehicle every year delivering. And you think about the materials to box the material, to put it in his car so he can drive, because he's not just going to put print material on the seat, right? He's going to put it somewhere. So there's material costs there's boxes. You think about shipping fees. You know, if you do ship something UPS or FedEx or whatever, your time spent delivering it, you know, again, my buddy's time in the car, like all that time, you can't ignore that.
Because it's inevitably it's time that you can be producing something else if you're not doing the driving. So you still have to cover that cost, right? It's still lost time in your business.
Right. Because that's exactly it. Like, and then you have to think about, okay, what if you hire a new person? That learning curve or the operator efficiencies, right? Training time and, you know, early mistakes that are made by new employees can cause problems for your business. You know, they can affect your budget for growth purposes, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to factor that in sometimes. And, you know, that's why I always tell people, don't price it to the minute. Because I think oftentimes you get yourself in trouble. People try to price it to the minute. Well, it only takes me 17 minutes to do this. Okay, well, charge for 30 minutes.
Yep.
Because you can do it in 17, but your other employee may not be as efficient. Or what if that guy's out sick that day, the guy that you usually have do it, and you have to have somebody else do it? Like, you don't want to lose money simply because of something you can't necessarily control.
Or what if in the middle of that 17 minutes, somebody calls into your shop and you got to talk to them for 5 minutes?
What if you go to the bathroom?
Yeah, I mean, there's...
Right? So, you know, now the question always comes down to, we've identified some areas that you can probably save some money, but how do you track these costs? I mean, what's your method for it? And maybe people out there have a tried and true method, and that's great. Because if you're one of the shops that tracks this stuff and has a way of tracking it, you're already steps ahead of a lot of businesses. But the one thing that I've always told people is having a job costing sheet is super important. Everything per job needs to be listed there, whether it's time, material, tooling usages, even mistakes, right? When you make a mistake, write it down. Track it. How much, you know, I'm going to explain the situation that happened here at ShopSabre. We had an issue where we're humans. We had a shipping guy load the wrong machine on a truck, right? It happens.
Yep.
Unfortunately, we didn't catch the mistake until the truck was on the road. And so that truck had to come back to us, unload. We had to load the right machine and head back. Well, all of that comes at a cost. I tracked all of it. I wrote it all down. I mean, Nick, you can speak to this. I asked everybody involved. I want a line item, you know, of what it costs us for that mistake. Not because I want to go back to the employee and create a big, you know, obviously we're gonna have a discussion about it, you know, but I wanted to understand what it did to my profits on that machine, right? Yep. We need to understand what we're doing to ourselves. And so it's a big part of running a business is just understanding those errors and recouping those costs and trying to make sure that, hey, what did we lose? So we can understand it and make sure that it's not an ongoing occurrence, right?
Yep. Well, I think that's a good point. Like you're documenting for multiple reasons, right? Yeah. So you know the costs, but then at the same time, you can address any issues or, you know, miscommunication or lack of whatever caused the thing to, whatever caused the thing to happen. Right. You're going to know for next time. So hopefully it doesn't happen again.
Exactly. And that's the bigger thing about errors is learning from them. And if you can show a real world cost, and that's what I always try to do is I show the employees involved, like, hey, this is what it ended up costing us. because it sometimes makes it so they realize, okay, that little mistake, compounded and turned into this bigger problem. So they're just more thoughtful of it, right? Like, hey, let's be more thorough with it. And we have great people here, so they took it very personally, but it's just good to understand it so that way you can all learn from it.
Well, and I think it makes you think too that the next time you're doing the same, loading a machine, you can be like, yeah, we're really busy, but taking this extra minute or two to make sure we have the right thing going on is going to be way less cost than what it's going to cost us to load the wrong thing.
Right, exactly. And the other thing that you could invest in, there are some products out there like a digital tracking tool. In fact, there's some apps for your phone now where you can do like project management apps. They're simple. They're spreadsheet form. Sometimes the CNC software will even output some stuff. And you can print off your software reports and know how much machining time you have. But like our machines have timers on them. They'll give you job timers on it. So obviously machines can help you with all of that process. Obviously repeated setups can be reduced. Inefficiencies can be reduced by using automation equipment, but having equipment helps you reduce waste. So I think that's a big thing of what can you do? Well, make sure you have automated equipment. Make sure you reduce the labor burden wherever you can, right? I think keeping clear documented information, taking your packing slips and making sure that, okay, if you bought 100 of something, divide them out by how many jobs you got out of those 100 things, because then you can start to understand the actual loss.
For sure.
So
Yep.
I know it takes a little bit to do inventory, right? Understand your inventory. So, and then you need to review it regularly. I think that's the big thing is don't set it, forget it. Because I think a lot of companies are that way. They set it, forget it, never evaluate it again, right? Or they go back monthly and they're like, oh, what happened? Well, if you would have looked at it on a weekly basis, you wouldn't have got months out and realized you had an issue.
That's what I was just thinking. Like if you, like you said, do it regularly, it doesn't, at the end of the year, all of a sudden you're trying to backpedal 12 months worth of stuff and figure it all out. Where if you figure out a mistake every week or catch a mistake each week, eventually they're going to, even itself out and be less, right? And you're not going to have to.
And that's why we do audits on ourselves. Like we'll audit our inventory regularly. And we do it because you don't want to be caught up at the end of the year and realize, oh my God, our inventory is way off. Right. No, just do it regularly, and little mistakes get caught right away and they don't turn into compounded issues over the year. So ultimately at the end of the day, why does this all matter? Because tracking hidden costs equals pricing more accurately to your customer, which is ultimately going to protect your profits. And there's two parts to that, because tracking hidden costs also allows you to understand your true cost. And I think a lot of business owners, especially in the early stages, they don't have a great way of tracking. So they fluff the numbers.
Sure.
Right? They add an extra $100 on there, or they add an extra $1,000 because of the miscellaneous things I might forget. Right? How many times have you heard somebody say that?
Right.
I'm going to throw a little bit extra in there just because I know there'll be things that pop up.
Yep.
But if I didn't have to fluff the number and I knew I was still profitable, could you be more aggressive with your pricing and therefore earn more business?
For sure.
Probably. Take more market share, right?
Yep.
So I think fluff often causes you to lose jobs. So you have to think about that. It's not only protecting your profits, but it's also protecting your customers from overpaying.
Right. I mean, and your business as a whole, right? Because you're going to not scare away customers that may come back and be like, well, last time I wanted to do this, it was a lot more expensive than I thought.
Right.
So I'm going to go to somebody else this time.
And I also think on the flip side, doing it this way helps you price the job appropriately.
Yep.
And it protects you from the fact that, oh yeah, we did that job for so-and-so and lost our tail, so let's do it again.
Yep.
Right? Like you just know that, okay, these aren't profitable jobs. And sometimes it frustrates companies because you'll see it sometimes when you're shopping and somebody says like minimum order size, right? Or they have minimum quantity, or they say job dollar amount, right? I've seen that with like landscape companies. Like I had a landscape company that was looking at something for my house, and their minimum, they're on their sales order said $1,500. And it's because they recognize, like, by the time they get their crew out there and get everything set up, like for a $300 job, it's probably not profitable for them.
For sure.
So
I mean, it's just like when you see anywhere outside of Amazon,
right,
free shipping if you spend over 50 or over 100, like
correct.
They know that their margin is high enough at that dollar amount to cover the shipping.
Right. There's certain limitations that, it's all based on margin. So you just have to understand that. Obviously you can't scale a shop that leaks money. I mean, it's simple as that, right? If your shop's bleeding out one end, it's probably not going to survive. It's just, I guess for me, if you're losing money on jobs, growth is just going to multiply your problems, right?
Yep.
So before you can grow,
your losses are just going to multiply then.
Correct. Right? Exactly. Before you can grow, you got to understand this stuff. And then real success is obviously every job moving your business forward, not just being a stepping stone. Because sometimes it's, you hear the old adage, rob Peter to pay Paul, right?
Yep.
And sometimes that's what your business turns into if you're not sure of where your profits are and where you end up in a situation where you're like, how did we spend this much money last year? Now we have to pay this tax bill, and then how do we do that? Oh, the next job will pay, and you end up in a really just bad situation.
Or like you do more jobs or more work than you did the prior year, but your profits were not any higher.
That's rough. Yeah. Especially if you find yourself, well, we work 80 hours a week this year, and at the end of the day, when we're said and done, we made no more money.
Right.
Well, that was a bad idea, right?
Yep.
I'd rather have my time back. So time is money, and we've talked about that in past episodes, but this is a good way to recognize your time, because there's a lot of businesses out there that waste a lot of time and doing little things. And like I said, I just think about shop towels and shop rags and lacquer thinner, WD-40 or whatever it is. Like, I see shops that are buying cases of this stuff, and you just often wonder, are they even factoring that cost into anything?
And I think you just need to not be afraid to do that, because obviously using those things is what gets you to your finished product that your customer's paying you for. So don't be afraid to include that price in what you're charging them, right?
Well, you think about it, like if you buy a box of towels, right? And you divide that out by how many jobs you did the whole month, you're not talking about massive dollar amounts to put, I don't know what is happening. Our lights?
We haven't moved enough to make the lights. The lights just went off.
Our lights just went out.
It's fascinating. That's never happened ever.
I've never seen the lights go out in this room. That's cool.
It happened to me.
Hello, lights.
Zoom meeting a couple times.
There it is. We're back.
That's just going to make for a fun video, huh?
That was
great.
That was definitely awkward. The lights just shut off in our podcast room.
Like, we do this every week and it doesn't happen. How did that just happen?
I don't know.
That's weird.
Well, for anybody who's not watching, we just lost our lights in our podcast room, as you can't tell.
We're on auto timers, obviously, to save energy.
We're saving money.
We've clearly not been sitting that still in here, so I don't know how.
We're tracking our costs, so we turned off our lights.
We saved 1/10 of 1% of $1 on that light going off for 11.2
And then
seconds.
derailed the whole episode because of it. So, but yeah, I don't even remember what we were talking about at that point. But honestly, again,
the 100 box of towels, 100 jobs, something.
But exactly, if 100, thank you. You buy a box of towels and you divide it out over your 100 jobs, and you're talking about pennies on the dollar, right? And then you add up, okay, now lacquer thinner and this and that, and yeah, you might add $5 to a job, but that $5 per job is the difference maker in losing money at the end of the year, right?
Sure.
In areas that you could easily. So like, we're not telling you have to add massive amounts of money to your jobs, but a $10, shop convenience fee or whatever you want to call it, right? Whatever you're charging for. I don't know what your business is. I'm just speaking openly here. But having, your shop supplies factored into your job is super important.
Right.
And
100%.
sometimes you don't put it into as a line item, right? Maybe you just, what your margin is, so you have to increase 1% on everything. It's not enough to change the world, right? But it's enough to change your world.
Enough to cover your butt.
Right. Helps you spend more money on marketing later on, because that's what I remind shops. And this is a huge takeaway for this. If you spent $25,000 last year on miscellaneous things that you didn't charge for, okay? And now this year you can recoup that $25,000. $25,000 may not change your life, right? It might not change your world. You might even be laughing and go, I'm not even going to worry about $25,000. But what if you take that $25,000 and put it into Google?
And it makes you $500,000 worth more money.
What if you're
or more?
You're a cabinet guy and you put that $25,000 into a ad on a billboard on the freeway? What if you run a radio ad or a radio commercial advertising your business for $25,000? Will you make any more money? Absolutely.
Yep.
The advertising is going to come back to you. And like, you think about running a radio ad in your area about Joe's Cabinet Shop, somebody's going to hear it and they're going to call you.
Yep.
And that's all with money that you just threw away the year before.
And even if you just get that one job from it,
right?
You got to think back, 5 years down the road and be like, how many people has this person now told about my company because of that advertisement that I put on the radio or billboard?
Yep.
It's just a snowball effect once it gets going.
I tell a story all the time that, again, going back to a buddy of mine who owns another company, he tells me the story he always talked about never saying no, right? He's the one who taught me that, is just don't say no to anything. Try to say yes to everything you can. And he even jokes that sometimes it just doesn't make sense to say yes, right? But sometimes people just say no because they want to say no, right? And he's like, sometimes it's inconvenient to say yes, but I'll say yes because I want to earn their business. And he talks about a situation where he said yes to a guy on a job that really wasn't anything he was excited about. That guy ended up being a franchise owner for like 17 different restaurants. And obviously he did this small job. He earned the entire business of this gentleman. He's done it for like 10 plus years now of this guy. And he's like, the hundreds of thousands of dollars I've made from this guy because I said yes to one stupid little job, you know? And I'm trying to remember what the job, he told me it, and it was like something silly. It was like printing off postcards or something for, I don't remember. It was something like really small job.
Yep.
He's like, I could have easily said no. I just said yes. Did it real fast. He goes, I worked a Saturday morning, did it. And yeah, he got it done. And now he's had this guy's business forever. But it goes back to this, like simply recouping your profits could put you in an advertising situation where you land that big job, right? Yep. Somebody hears an ad and that one person owns a hotel company, right? And they need you to do 1,000 hotel room renovations because of one advertising you did. Like, you just never know what that next job will be. But if you're not out there chasing it, I can tell you what it won't be, you know? And
won't
so
be 1,000 hotel rooms.
Right, exactly. So, you know, that's kind of my final takeaway of this whole subject is you can't control what you don't track, you know? And if you don't get serious about hidden costs, you're never going to see a real return on that, you know? And so every job you do should teach you something about efficiency, about pricing, profitability. You know, you need to dial in your workflow. You got to reduce insufficiencies in your business. And if you're still doing things manual, because I know there's some people out there still listening to me today talk about business and they're saying, I still do things the hard way. You got to, it's time to start exploring automation through ShopSabre. Like, let us help you work smarter there. It's going to reduce your costs. You know, obviously there's a lot of different ways we can talk about it, but as always, subscribe to Talkin Shop for more real world strategies to grow your CNC business, your business in general, you know, a smarter way in general to grow. So that's what we're here about. This week, I got a motivational quote for you all, unless Nick's got something else to say.
I'm good right now.
Okay. And I had a different motivational quote this week, but I'm changing it. I'm going to change my motivational quote this week because I came into this podcast room and I get a little bit kind of emotional about it because it was my son. My son came here last week at the end of the week, and my son's 10 years old. He set foot in here just because he had the opportunity to be here for the afternoon. Nick, you put him to work. He loves it. He's convinced he's skipping school to come be on this podcast. He told me that. Yeah. He said Nick told him that he gets to.
For the record, I didn't say that. I would never encourage a kid to skip school.
He's convinced that you did, though. And we may actually have him on the podcast someday because he's like, fun. He really wants to come see what this is all about. But why I'm bringing this motivational quote is my son wrote on this whiteboard right next to us. We have a whiteboard in this room. I always have it there. Rarely is anything on it. It's just been in this room forever.
There's been nothing on it since you kicked me out of this office.
Yeah, I was gonna say, actually, I think that was your whiteboard because I kicked you out of this office. But what it says on that board is what I want to say. And it says, make someone smile every day. And this is my 10-year-old that wrote this on this board. I don't know what made him do that. He was here hanging out for the day. I had a meeting to jump into. So I told him, hey, hang out in the podcast room for a little bit. He goes, can I draw on the whiteboard? I said, sure. I never came back in here until this morning to do this. And there's a picture of two guys on there. They're two stick figures and they're both saying hi to each other. And he has the word smile in big letters. And it just says, make someone smile every day. And that's a 10-year-old. And it makes me proud because as his dad, like, I don't know where he learned that, but I am proud of him because I think a lot of adults could learn from that statement every single day. Yes, our lives are hectic. Yes, there's lots of things going on, and it's so easy to get caught up in crappy situations that they don't go your way, and people like try to manipulate a situation by making the other person feel bad. And I think so much more can be gained in this world by us just helping one another. And if a 10-year-old is smart enough to say, make someone smile every day, as an adult, we can do it too.
And it's simple to do.
So simple. If you've ever thought about, maybe you got somebody in your office and, you've looked at them and you're like, hey, you know what? I love their shoes, but you just never say it. Tell them you love their shoes. Yep. Like, you don't understand how little things like that can mean the world to somebody. They're having a rough day and you tell them that you like the hat they're wearing, or you tell them that their smile lights up the room, or you go in, I've done it. You walk into a Starbucks or you walk into a, coffee shop or whatever. And, the person there is so delightful and bubbly that they just instantly make you feel better about your day. Tell them. It's like, your energy is just so positive. Like, make sure they know that. So that's my motivational quote today, is just make someone smile every day.
I went to the coffee shop this morning.
Oh, Lord.
I did, actually.
Really?
Yeah. Told the guy I wanted to buy a bagel with cream cheese.
Yeah?
He looked back at me and said, sir, we only accept cash. Made him smile though, didn't I? I made you smile.
You did. Thank you. Oh, you're ridiculous. But
It's been a couple weeks.
it has. That was a good one. It was a good one.
This whole not having notes thing.
I walked into that too with the coffee shop.
I know. And it popped right in my head. I'm like, hey, I need to use this one.
That's good. I like that one. But that's the truth. Like dumb dad jokes that, you know what? I give you crap about them, but people smile. People like them. And, you know, I hope some of you use these in your shop because it's kind of fun. But for us, that's really what it's about. You know, obviously is making people excited about going to work every day. That's what CNC automation is for us. We do this because we truly enjoy what we do.
Yep, for sure.
If we were doing it for any other reason, we'd probably be miserable, right?
Yeah,
you know, there's so many other things that you can do with your life, but if you have to go to work every day, do something you enjoy. I love being in this industry. I love helping customers and shops be successful. I love hearing their success stories. But again, making somebody smile is so easy. So that's what I take away from this shop or from this episode of Talkin Shop. So anything else for today?
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, for everybody who tuned in, we're going to be back next week. Another episode. We're going to get into turning your bad days into good days. That's going to be next week's episode. I'm pretty excited about it. So stay tuned for that one. But until then, thanks for tuning in to Talkin Shop with ShopSabre. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Nick.
Until next time, keep talking shop.